Good morning, everyone. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Wednesday, June 3rd, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. Before we get started, here are the stories we're following at this hour. Reviewing the largest supplementary budget in South Korea's history, the extra budget plan is likely to amount to almost $29 billion. It's aimed at cushioning an economy battered by COVID-19 pandemic. Protests across the United States continue over the death of an African-American man while in police custody. Officials are bracing for renewed violence as curfews start taking effect coast to coast. World leaders are divided over whether to expand the G7 summit in the fall. The EU and others say Russia should not be readmitted despite President Trump's invite. The South Korean government is reviewing its proposed third supplementary budget of the COVID-19 era, aimed at countering some of the economic fallout from the pandemic, as well as supporting biotech projects related to virus prevention. According to the presidential secretary, the third extra budget is likely to be around $29 billion, the largest extra budget in history. And the finance minister has also previously said the government also plans to prepare a roadmap for a universal employment insurance system by the end of this year. Now, perhaps a steady return to a new normal. The third batch of students are heading back to classrooms in South Korea in the next coming hours after months off due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Around 1.8 million students, those in first year of high school, second year of middle school, and third to fourth year of elementary school will resuming to classes on this Wednesday. With this, a total of 77% of the student population will be back in classrooms. Now, due to the rising number of COVID-19 cases here in South Korea, the Education Ministry said that as of Tuesday this week, a total of 534 schools remain shut, but are around Kupang. Most of them are in Kupang logistics centers in Pucheon, where a cluster infection had occurred. In that area and some parts of Incheon, students, except high school seniors, won't be going back to school until next Wednesday. With fewer people flying, duty-free shops have seen their profits tumble. And to help the struggling industry, the South Korean government has introduced special measures, including allowing them to sell duty-free items within the country. Our Chang Tae-hyun with this report.
The number of foreign visitors to South Korea fell by 43% on year in February and plunged by 95% in March due to the COVID-19 outbreak. And duty-free stores have felt the brunt of this drop in visitors. In the first quarter of this year, Lotte Duty-Free's profits were down 96% compared to the previous year. And the Silla and Shinsegae saw operating losses of $40 million and $26.5 million respectively. To help those firms overcome this difficult period, the Korea Customs Service will allow them to sell items that have been stocked up for more than 6 months. Shinsegae will start selling some brands online with a 10 to 50% discount starting this Wednesday.
People can make online reservations, pay taxes, and receive the items at home in about a week.
Lotte Duty-Free will start selling surplus products from 10 brands at its department stores and outlets by the end of this month. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said Monday that airports in Korea will reduce the rent for businesses at the airport. Small and medium-sized businesses will get up to a 75% off, while larger companies can get up to 50% off. Airports have also extended their grace period for rent payment from 3 months to 6 months. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign exchange reserves increased in the month of May. According to the Bank of Korea on this Wednesday, reserves reached roughly $407 billion last month, up more than $3.3 billion compared to the month before. The BOK said the rise was mainly due to the weaker greenback, which pushed up the value of other foreign currency assets held by the country. And as of the end of April, South Korea had the world's 9th largest foreign exchange reserves, with China topping the list. Germany's largest airline, Lufthansa, is resuming some of its international flights, including those to South Korea. Now, this follows European countries' plans to ease travel restrictions and increase demand for overseas trip. Now, there will be 3 flights a week from Incheon International Airport to Munich starting June 24th, but adjustments could be made depending on market conditions. Back in March, Lufthansa suspended flight services between Incheon and Munich, as well as between the Incheon and Frankfurt due to the COVID-19 pandemic. New York City has extended its nightly curfew for the next 5 days after peaceful protests descended into a night of looting and violence. The criminality included the looting of one of the city's most famous department stores. Our Lee Seung-jae with a story.
Bracing for an 8th straight day of protests, many cities across the U.S. are now gearing up for the worst. This includes New York City, which has now extended an 8 p.m. nightly curfew for another 5 days after another night of violence and looting on Monday. The unrest, including the looting of an iconic Macy's department store, also prompted officials to bring forward the start of the curfew to 8 p.m. from 11 p.m. In addition to the extended curfew, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo ordered the dispatch of another 4,000 police officers in the city to try to maintain order. On Monday night alone, the NYPD made more than 700 arrests. An officer in the Bronx was reportedly struck by a vehicle, while videos showed other officers scuffling with protesters. Macy's department store was just one of many businesses targeted by looters. Despite the ongoing unrest, Cuomo touted the nation's largest police force, arguing against deploying the National Guard or the military. Meanwhile, services remembering George Floyd, who died in police custody in Minneapolis, will take place in 2 states over the course of 6 days. This includes a memorial service in Minneapolis on Thursday, followed by a public memorial next Monday in his hometown of Houston, Texas. And as many mourn the death of Mr. Floyd, many say the continued unrest draws comparisons to the civil disturbance of the late 1960s, following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Staying with that story, a social media has been flooded with a Blackout Tuesday hashtag, a day promoted by activists to observe, mourn, and try to bring about police reform in the U.S. Millions of users have shared black screens in solidarity with the black victims of police violence in the United States, with many tagging their posts with hashtags saying Black Lives Matter and BLM. However, critics say that these posts, while well-meaning, could clog up critical channels of information and updates. And this all began as a proposed day of reflection by music industry insiders after the death of African-American man George Floyd. It was thought up by 2 music industry executives to observe, quote, the long-standing racism and inequality in the U.S. and to pause business for a day. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has slammed the Chinese and Hong Kong authorities for banning a vigil marking the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square protest. Taking it to Twitter, Pompeo said Tuesday that, quote, if there is any doubt about Beijing's intent, it is to deny Hong Kongers a voice and choice, making them the same as mainlanders. Pompeo has long criticized Beijing's actions toward Hong Kong, most recently approving the territory as not autonomous from mainland China. Now, this also prompted President Trump to impose visa restrictions and end bilateral agreements between the U.S. and Hong Kong. The U.S. State Department added that Pompeo is planning to meet with Tiananmen Square survivors. The European Union and China have joined a growing chorus of G7 members to raise their opposition to U.S. President Donald Trump's idea of expanding membership to countries like Russia. Our Kim Hyo-sun with more.
President Trump's proposal of expanding the membership of this year's G7 summit has drawn the ire of other member countries. European countries and Canada have been speaking out against President Trump's invitation to include Russia, which was expelled from the group, formerly known as the G8, in 2014.
Russia was excluded from the G7 after it invaded Crimea a number of years ago, and its continued disrespect and flaunting of international rules and norms is why it remains outside of the G7 and will continue to remain out.
The European Union also stressed that the member states sit together because they have shared values, interests, and commitments.
Cooperation is crucial, but among like-minded countries, more than ever. And the Russia participation in the G, at that time 8, as you know, has been suspended until Russia changes course and the environment allows for the G8 again have a meaningful discussion. And this is not currently the case.
Moscow has also pointed out that the expanded G7 membership still lacks representation, while it's right in principle. Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson said Tuesday that any global issues could not be a success without China, adding that the G20, which includes the G7 and BRICS countries, is more effective in addressing international issues. China naturally criticized President Trump's proposal, saying all forms of international organization and cooperation should be based on mutual trust and multilateralism. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
While the WHO publicly praised China for what it called Beijing's speedy response to the COVID-19 pandemic back in January, a report by the Associated Press say, behind the scenes, it was quite a different story. Citing a recording of international meetings held by the UN Health Agency, AP reported that WHO officials were lauding China in public because they wanted to coax more information out of the Chinese government. However, privately, it said the WHO complained about that China was not sharing enough data to assess how effectively the virus was spreading between people or what risk it posed to the rest of the world. Reports add that China may have delayed the release of crucial information by at least 2 weeks, costing valuable time.
Good morning. Brace for a hot summer-like day today in the capital. We'll see the high rising 6 degrees more than yesterday. And those of you in Daegu and its surrounding regions will have highs we normally see at the end of July. We kicked off the day under plenty of clouds, but skies will get sunnier as we head into the afternoon, and UV levels will be very high in most regions except on Jeju Island, where the spotty rain could fall during the day. So overall, it's going to be a bright and sweltering afternoon for most of us, so keeping a face mask on during the day will be a real challenge. So let's all try to take it easy today and drink plenty of water. Highs in Seoul will also hike to 30 degrees from this weekend, and the heat will carry on into early next week, while skies will feature plenty of sunshine and there will be very little in the way of clouds. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that does it for this edition of Arirang News. But more news lineup coming up at noon Korea time, so do join us again then. As always, thank you for watching.